Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Sword Art Online Alicization anime review. This one's going to be for episode 43, which is called Awakening. And yeah, this was another fantastic episode. We got the return of Kirito in the last episode, as well as, a big fight before that happened. This episode, though, finally delivered to us, Kirito in action. Plus a lot of other great stuff. I thought like pretty much all of this episode was really good, and I think for the most part well adapted. You'll probably see some people who've read the light novels like complaining about like them leaving out a few scenes, and I kind of agree, especially on one of them. Like they didn't show a kiss between Kirito and Asuna, which is in the light novel, which I don't get why they didn't include. Like, how much importance do you place on, there being a kiss between the characters? But given that it was the big reunion and you did basically everything except that between them, it just felt a little frustrating that they didn't, show that moment, given that like this whole arc, especially War of the Underworld has been, Asuna diving into the game to fight to get Kirito back, and now he's back and you don't kind of deliver on the kiss. It's just another one of those kind of weird adaptation things of just they decided to leave out that scene very oddly, in the same way that they changed the Vizago backstory kind of did not include some kind of important information, and then they changed the Kirito and his memories moment as he finishes his recovery basically, to leave out again some kind of important scenes. It's just almost kind of needless changing and like chopping some stuff out for no real reason, especially in this episode where one section of it is basically just a quite lengthy explanation about like Fluke light acceleration, and like this is what it is normally, this is what we can push it up to, this is what we can do if we turn the limiter off, but if you go completely every limiter off, it goes up to 5 million, and then let's relay this information to Kirito. I think they perhaps could have cut down the explanation just a little bit to make it a little bit more concise, and then include a little bit more of the scene that actually happens between Kirito and Asuna in the air as they're flying together. But other than that, the whole confrontation between Kirito and Vizago was, I think, really well done. Both, the build-up during the fight, all the kind of plot events that happened, the details of it, the aftermath, and then building up to, I suppose, the final sequence of the episode where he arrives to sort of save Alice, and but in this case saves the two dragons, and it's like, okay, Kirito versus Subtilizer, let's go, final battle, let's do this as we're getting towards the end of the season. Only 4 episodes to go, so likely it's going to be the next 2 episodes will bring the like arc here to an end, and then the last 2 episodes will be the epilogue, which the epilogue is like a whole third of volume 18, so they're going to need more than just 1 episode for the epilogue here, and hopefully they give it the time it needs. I suppose I would have a slight worry about how much they've been chopping and changing things, that they might not give that epilogue enough time, but I think they should be able to get through a lot of the fight quicker than you think. So that's why I think they will be able to, get through the rest of the arc as it happens in the underworld within the next 2 episodes. So I think that should be okay. But yeah, let's get into the specifics here. Of course, it's most of the episode, the main focus is going to be Kirito versus Vizago. And what I loved about this so much was that, one, they didn't go 100% all out with the animation. They gave a good animation, but you can tell they're definitely saving a lot of it up for Kirito versus Gabriel Miller, because we already know that like Asuna was technically able to defeat Vizago. He's only alive still because of the way his weapon works, the mate chopper, and how it keeps him alive through the sort of fighting that's happening around them, and that's the one thing that Asuna wasn't able to kind of get past, basically, was that she had no way to stop the fighting around her that Vizago is basically amplifying and making happen, which is fueling his weapon, which is fueling his life, basically. So she can defeat him in combat, but she just can't stop his ability from happening. So how is Kirito going to do that? Kirito, we should be able to defeat him in combat, but now that he's back, will he have the solution to get through Vizago's unique abilities? And he does, and it's really, really clever and well thought out from like it feels like the beginning of the arc, how it works, because of all of the connections that they make with regards to like how Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh's swords work together, the origin of both of their swords, and how they fit the abilities that they have, and all that stuff I think works so well, in combination with the fact that they don't just like do the thing here where it's like, oh, Asuna couldn't defeat Vizago, so let's have Kirito come in and he will manage to do it. I like that there's a sort of like evenness to both of the fights. Asuna defeated him, Kirito defeated him, but he just had the unique abilities that could finish him. And especially the fact that Kirito needed the assistance from Yu-Gi-Oh, the memories, the spirit of Yu-Gi-Oh coming in to give him the last bit of strength needed to push him back. Very similar to how Asuna needed that strength, the memories of Yuki to push him back and deliver the Mother's Rosario. That kind of like duality of the two fights I think works so well to help make the fights feel very even. These have been our two main characters here from the entire series, and they both get a big fight against the main villain from SAO, the leader of Laughing Coffin, who caused them all so much pain and misery over the course of that such an important arc to the series and them as characters being SAO survivors. So that I thought was brilliant, just that you have those two moments of Asuna with the spirit of Yuki and then Kirito with the spirit of Yu-Gi-Oh as being the thing that pushes them over the edge to have them defeat POH in combat. And that was really well done. But okay, he basically has beat him, but he just has his sword through the hole that was already there in his chest. That doesn't solve the problem, and he points that out. Like, he's happy to like, oh, our fight can continue, Black Swordsman. So how do we actually resolve the issue that's happening here, which is this feedback loop of, as the foreign players fight the Japanese players, more and more life energy gets shot off into the sky and then gets absorbed into his sword, which keeps him alive. That is, as much as this chaos is going on, he's going to continue to keep being able to fight no matter what happens to him. So how does Kirito stop that? He's already encased everyone in ice, but the second the ice melts, as Vizago points out, they'll just start fighting again and I'll be back in action. So this is where the combination of abilities is so good. He uses the release recollection of Yu-Gi-Oh's sword, because when Yu-Gi-Oh helped him, it restored the Blue Rose sword. And the release recollection, as we know, it encases them in ice, of course, but then it sucks out their life energy and forms it into like ice roses. And then the energy of their death is kind of, ejected into the atmosphere. So it's this painless way to basically defeat all of the foreign players, so that they don't feel the pain because they weren't killed by like a blow from a sword. Literally just the numbers of their life were subtracted, basically. And especially in the light novel, I think they make that pretty clear, of just that the way this operates is it is a kind of calculation within the game mechanics that causes their life force to go down to zero, rather than them feeling the pain of like effectively being killed and then them kind of dying in the game. So it's this painless, peaceful way to end the fight. That was great, but it still doesn't solve the problem of the fact that all of that spatial resources is being just rejected into the atmosphere and will be sucked into the mate chopper, which will just fuel Vizago. But that's when the ability of Kirito's sword comes into play. It has the ability to absorb spatial resources, because Kirito's sword was made from the Gigas tree, which as a tree sucked up all of the resources from the area, which is why it was the only thing that could grow. The farmers in Ruled Village couldn't grow anything else because this tree was there. That's what created that sort of stagnant village within that game. That this mission that could never be accomplished, the woodcutter chopping down the gigas tree, was because it was limiting what could happen, basically. So that was, I think, really, really clever. And just that moment of Kirito holding both of the swords up in the air, one black, one blue, and one makes the energy, the other absorbs it, and he obviously he defeats all of the other players, so it takes away the chaos. He takes away the energy as well, and then uses all of that energy to heal himself and everyone else around them. Fantastic way to utilize the abilities to stop this crazy situation that has been going on for the last bunch of episodes, which has just been more and more players from like Korea and America jumping into the game to be opponents for all of our characters, basically. And Kirito has stopped it with a clever use of abilities. But how does he actually stop Vizago for good? And this is where he again uses his sword. His sword used to be a tree, so he basically implants the memories of his sword into Vizago and turns him into a tree. And I think this is very fitting in a way that the overall villain of like SAO, who has this hatred for Kirito and Asuna, is defeated by being turned into a tree, which is essential to like the start of the Alicization arc with Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh! That he's defeated by a combination of Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh's swords, the two characters who were woodcutters at the start of the series, that them cutting down the Gigas tree started their journey, and then Kirito here sort of making a new one is sort of what brings Vizago to an end. And it's a fitting way to do it, in that he admits, they say it, if Kirito just kills Vizago, he can just log into the game again. He might not have a powerful account, but he's back. He's there to cause chaos, and he's going to be able to do that. So they have to keep him in the game, but unable to do anything. So as a tree, the only thing he'll ever be able to feel for the next however long he's stuck in the game is if anyone tries to cut him down. That's very fitting in a way for him, just this player who lives to kind of thrive off people killing each other is going to live the most boring life with no senses or anything like that going on. So it's this cruel, but it's sort of fitting for the character that he gets nothing in the end, basically. And it's a further highlight of just the level of Kirito's abilities, that he understands how this world works so much that he can do something like that he can use basically the knowledge of how like the tree was turned into his weapon to do sort of the reverse to someone else. That's very fitting in my mind. So and this sort of comes into play as well when they explain the Fluke light acceleration thing of like Vizago's going to be stuck in here for like 200 plus years, because who's getting him out? Like, he can't log out. The acceleration is going to hit Vizago. He is going to spend 200 years as a tree with the zero senses in the game. Like, what sort of a fate is that for him? It's very, very interesting. But yeah, I suppose I also need to talk about Kiritos Transformation, and the fact that he gets the support from Yu-Gi-Oh! And what it does is it restores the Blue Rose Sword, but it gives Kirito his full Black Swordsman outfit and getup. And I love that transformation because, one, it's like, that is Kirito. Secondly, it was with, these swords, which actually have so much more meaning than his two swords from Aincrad, which I find very, very interesting, in that, there is some significance to the two swords that he has, obviously, in SAO, in that, one is like a rare drop, and then the other one was made by Lisbeth, based on like their story that they had together in SAO. But here, it's like the two swords that come basically from his friendship with his best male friend, that's very, very significant. That it's the Black Swordsman, but with the best swords he's ever had. And that's very fitting for me. And I especially liked, I thought the best part of the transformation was the scabbards for both swords, basically shooting out of Ronier and TS's hands and forming the X on his back. That was the final part of the look. I really liked how that was done. And I like that they didn't forget to have the little moment with TS, that she sees that little moment of Yu-Gi-Oh! Spirit. And she obviously had strong feelings for him as well. So her getting to see him again, that she wants Kirito to win, but it's Yu-Gi-Oh!, her mentor, who kind of gives him the strength to push him over the line. That was nice. And then, as I suppose, a bit of a setup, and also important for the Renly episode that we had a while ago, him and TS have they show kind of Renly coming over to her, and just the setup for that little dynamic which will come into play. That all worked really well, because you have everyone just being like, yeah, Kirito is back, everyone is so happy. And as that fight comes to an end, Vizago defeated once and for all, the bane of all of the SAO players is finally defeated. He gets, the praise from everyone. Like the remaining knights from the underworld bow to him. All of the players just have their little time to either go up to Kirito and say something to him or say something about him. Klein is one of the first people up, which I thought was very fitting. But then you cut around, Egil says something, Silica and Lisbeth, hug about it. And they cut to Asuna a few times during this, and it's okay, they're building up to her big moment, and so the pathway finally clears and we get the full-on proper reunion. But there's almost not time for it, because Asuna has to say that Alice is being chased by Subtilizer, we have to get going. But they still leave a little bit just of time for them to just have a little embrace, and it works super, super well. Obviously, this isn't the moment when the light novel kiss happens. That happens when they're flying in a second. But still, it's a great scene overall. And of course, as Kirito flies off with Asuna, I think that's a fun moment. He just picks her up, and it's just this signal of course Kirito would do that, and she's just happy to accept it. That just, your perfect couple in a way in the series. And then the ability of him to fly like that also highlights just the level of control he has over the abilities in this world as well. That he doesn't need to do a ton of system call commands to make the flight ability happen. He just does it. And it was similar with the healing rain ability that he uses. He uses the rest of the energy to heal himself and everyone else. It just highlights, this is what he's capable of now, because in part because Higa has connected him to everything within the game. He's connected to multiple different STLs as well as the main visualizers, so he has the kind of power potential of the entire game open to him at this point. So that's why he's sort of so powerful, in addition to the fact that he's just sort of truly understood now how this world works, that it is more about imagination and just the willpower to power your imagination, rather than just knowing all of the commands. That was sort of the thing that Administrator was never able to, I suppose, properly understand. She was just I have the full list of commands, I can do whatever I want. But it was ultimately the power of incarnation that was the thing that sort of defeated her in the end, not specific commands necessarily. But yeah, once they get into the air, they pretty much cut to the scene where they explain the whole Fluke light acceleration thing, which is basically just that Critter and co activate that. So they force the max acceleration phase to happen. There's a 15-minute countdown timer until it does happen. And the main setup from this is basically that once that countdown ends, the game will go into a phase where it accelerates at 5 million times speed. And obviously that means 1 second is actually 5 million seconds, and the way that they calculate it is basically that once it happens, we can stop it if we get to the right console, but it will still take a few minutes to stop. But during those few minutes at that acceleration, anyone in the game will basically have to experience like 200 years within Underworld just from a few minutes of this acceleration phase being on while we attempt to stop it. So they point out at this point again the difference between, I suppose, the lifespan of the body and the lifespan of the soul or Fluke light. That, you know, most people die at 100, just give or take. That's when the physical body will become the limit. But they figured out that the lifespan of the soul, the Fluke light, is actually more like 200 and a bit. So even though you have more lifespan with your soul, that's threatening to be the limiting factor all of a sudden with the acceleration phase. And there's this huge fear that if Kirito and Asuna, who are the ones at risk of this because they're in on the ocean turtle, as well as Vizago and Gabriel Miller, but we don't really, of course, care about those two. Kirito and Asuna are the ones at risk here, being right there. They specifically note Lifa and Sinon will be logged out because they're sort of remotely connected from Japan. So there won't be enough sort of a data stream for that to hold up 5 million times speed. So that's good to get that out of the way, showing and highlighting who is and who is not at risk because of this. So we obviously find out that like Higa is back up and running. He is going to have to be the one to stop this once it gets going, and Kikuoka this time is going to be the one to go with him to, like, you know, protect him during this. So is Kikuoka going to get a sort of opportunity here to sort of redeem himself, because he's sort of been the one almost like leading the charge on Project Alicization as being a way to form military AI to use in, like, for controlling like drone bomb strikes and stuff like that. They now realize that there's something bigger going on here. This isn't just for military use, that this is a whole different form of life, that the fight is for Alice as the first proper ALICE AI. And it's not to treat her as a weapon, but as a life form, as like a human, just a different type of human, basically. So I like that, like, on that side of the episode, it does kind of come back to what it's all actually about, fundamentally. But yeah, like, they spend a little bit, probably too much time explaining the whole Fluke light acceleration thing. But it is the main threat going into, like, the final battle, that they've got a time limit to defeat the final villain under. Otherwise, you know, our two main characters could be trapped in this world for 200 years, and theoretically their souls will die before their actual body does. And that's just crazy to even think about. So that's when, like, Higa mentions, oh, like, Kikuoka, you can call Kirito, I've made a connection to him. And so it's at this point, like, just prior to the call coming in from Kikuoka, is where in the light novel Kirito and Asuna have their kiss. But it's after a few scenes of them talking about things, like Kiritos' memories of everything that happened is beginning to come back, including the fact that the girls all had that sort of, you know, slumber party together where they all talked about their experiences with Kirito. And so Asuna learned about, like, his experiences with, like, Ronye, Sortaliena, and Alice. And he suddenly realizes that this is a thing that happened, and it's just like, I didn't mean any of that, please don't hurt me, kind of type thing. And Asuna's just kind of like, she treats, like, this, another one of these kind of awkward Kirito moments as just being the thing that confirms to her that even though she hasn't seen him in a while, he's still the same Kirito. He's back to normal. Like, nothing has changed here. And so I really like that fun little moment to just, you know, highlight that any worry that Asuna might have had, like, no, it's still the same guy, of course, just as awkward in many ways. But, you know, that's part of their dynamic, of course. And then after that, they have their kiss and are interrupted then by Kikuoka calling. And then the main point of the call is just to create the dynamic where Kikuoka tells Kirito all of the details, and then Kirito doesn't tell Asuna all of the details, presenting the idea that when it comes down to it, what is actually going to happen. Kirito, of course, says that, like, we better hurry up, we've only got a little bit of time, and they're confident of getting it done. But Kirito knows that, like, okay, I know the specifics of, like, what will happen if we do go over time, and sort of what he is and is not willing to do. So the setup is, like, kind of Asuna worried that she doesn't have the full information on this, which is kind of a setup for, like, the final few minutes of what's about to happen here. So that's just what that little look was, that worried look on Asuna as they kind of cut away from them. It's just that specific conversation was not to both of them, it was just specifically to Kirito. Asuna didn't hear what Kikuoka was saying, only what Kirito relayed to her. And then, the final kind of, I suppose, notable scene here is Alice arrives at the World End altar with the two dragons, of course, including her own one, Amayori, and she doesn't want them to get hurt, trying to protect her, so she asks them to leave at this point and kind of live on. She just says, you find a wife, you find a husband, have baby dragons, raise them to be powerful, and have their own knights, and just live a happy life from here on out. Go. I'll do what I have to do here, you guys just go. But they won't leave her. They're so loyal to her, they will not leave. And they're actually going to buy her some more time as Subtilizer arrives on the scene. And of course, she can't fly at this point, so there's nothing she can do to, like, get involved in this fight just yet. So she has to just watch on as the dragons fight for her. And it's just kind of showing you that, like, Alice is this, like, it's important to get Alice out, meaning she can't really get involved in the fight. She has to focus on removing herself from the equation here, and that's how they win. And that's just an interesting dynamic for her to be in, of, like, she isn't entirely sure, like, what exactly is going to happen when she does get ejected into the real world. So it's this, she knows this idea of, like, this isn't the real world, and that she has to go to the real world. But what does that mean? And the question is, like, what's going to happen to her when she does eject herself, and who will be the one to grab her on the outside? Because there's still, enemies in the ocean turtle, so that's the other dynamic here. But the dragons are, like, pushing themselves to their limits with their kind of elemental breath attacks, but he's just blocking them and is about to, like, kill them when Kirito arrives on the scene to sort of save the day. And I think that the big thing in this moment is just Alice gets to see that Kirito is back. And that is the key thing. That at the start of War of the Underworld, it was Alice who was looking out for the comatose Kirito. Most of their time together has been her sort of looking after him and protecting him as he's been in this state. So she just directly has sort of seen Kirito the most like this. So it is a big thing for her to see him back in action and ready to fight to protect her and protect the dragons as well. So that's really cool, because of course they fought together at the end of the first half of the arc, but this is kind of her really getting to see him, like, kind of go all out, and that's kind of quite a nice thing as well. So that's where the episode ends, with the tease of Subtilizer versus Kirito, and Alice super, super close to the World End altar. So, like I said, there's 4 episodes left, I believe, of this season. Next 2 episodes, I think, will have to bring the underworld stuff to an end, and then I think they have to give 2 episodes to the epilogue, given that it is like a third of the book if you read volume 18. There's no way they can cover that in 1 episode, and I think they need to give the epilogue the time it needs. I'm a little bit worried about that, just because they have been skipping over a couple of interesting scenes in recent episodes, but I don't think there's any way they can sort of justify trying to cut that amount of content down to just one episode. I really, struggle how they were actually going to do that properly. Because so much of the cool stuff in the epilogue, I think, needs to happen. So, yeah, that's I think most of what I want to talk about with this episode. I really, really did like it. The whole Vizago stuff I thought was really well done. The aftermath, even the explanation stuff I thought was really well done, and the final little moment there with Alice and the dragons. I do wish they'd included the Kirito Asuna kiss. I think it was just something that like the fans sort of needed at that point, but they might be building up to place it at a point where they maybe feel it maybe has more value, but I'm not really sure. Hopefully we get our Kirito and Asuna kind of romance moment before the arc comes to an end. Just because, again, this arc started off with sort of a big romance kind of type moment of like Asuna agreeing to go with Kirito to America to kind of live with him, basically. So I think we need to come back to like romance development for the two at some point. But anyway, so yeah, in the comments let me know your thoughts were on this episode. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.